Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today at Photo Plus Plus. We have a great demonstration today, an explanation from Kara Puchinich, who's a professional photographer, formerly had a portrait studio. She's done a lot of educational sessions on all things Photoshop, and I just love her beginning compositing classes. You're looking at an image of that class right now. Um, Maybe we can switch to not screen share so we can see Kara and
Yeah.
I.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I thought I
There we
paused it.
are. Yeah, there we
Yay.
are. There we're there. So everyone, meet Kara. I'm Kathy Scabetta from Adobe. Again, thrilled to have you guys with us today. It's going to be an action-packed, super fun hour. If you have any questions for Kara, or you need clarification, etc., throw those in the Q&A area or the chat pod, and I'll make sure that they get relayed to Kara. Without further words from me, let's turn it over to Kara.
Awesome. Well, hello up and at it. Kathy, going to be building this fun composite here in Photoshop. And you can see that it's got a lot of different pieces, but it's a perfect beginning project. And we're going to be going through how we make these selections and work with layers and layer masks and blending modes and all that good stuff to images when you are building composites. And of course, there's places like Adobe Stock that could really inspire you with images. And you can also take your own and create your own. And if we have time, I can show you some fun examples of that maybe on the back end of all of this. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a new blank document to uh, hold our composite. So I'm going to come up here and choose File, New. And obviously you can make this whatever size you want. When I'm presenting, I want to keep things kind of small just for computer power purposes. So I'm going to stick with a 5x7 at 300 pixels per inch. And here we have our nice blank document. So we are ready to start building this. You can see here I've got the different images open across the top. So we just have, what is that, 5 different pictures that we'll be working with today. So we're going to start with this picture of this woman with the umbrella. So anytime that you are making a selection, you really want to think about the best way to do it. And Photoshop offers a million different possibilities of how you select something. And so you really just kind of want to analyze the image and think about what is happening in this image and how can I best take advantage of Photoshop's different selection tools. And sometimes you need the really sophisticated, the new ones that we'll see here momentarily. But my favorites are just like the old school simple ones. And so in that case, I'm going to grab just the magic wand tool. It's over here on the toolbar, and the keyboard shortcut is W. So the magic wand tool works by selecting pixels of a similar color. And it just so happens that this document has a pretty clear background. So we're going to use that to our advantage. And we're going to actually select the woman. The woman, even though we look at this with our eyes and we think it's just black and white, it do is come up here in the toolbar or this is turned on. And that's going to allow the magic wand to select the background here, the sky, but it will stop when it gets to anything values here on her arm or her hands. They might be similar enough to the sky. So all we have to do is give it a click, and we can see that we net from the select menu where all things selection live, but we can see that the marching ants now are around her and not to copy. And let's go over to our blank image here. And then I'll paste it in, Command or Control V. And that looks great. And it's really large, which is a good thing. Anytime that you're building composites, you got to think about the images that you're using and if they're going to be big enough to appear in your final piece. So if I had pasted her in and she was itty bitty, we'd kind of be in trouble because generally speaking, you don't want to just enlarge things that are pixel based. So it's a good sign that she is in here pretty large. So before we do anything else, we should protect her by converting her to what's called a smart object. And a smart object is going to take all of her rich pixel data and it's basically going to pack it in a little suitcase and keep it along with her in the layer in case we need it later. And that's going to allow us to scale her down. And then if we change our minds later, we'll be able to scale her back up because we've saved that pixel data. So how we do that is over here on the layer itself, if we right click or control click, we can select convert to smart object. And it's kind of hard to see that that really does anything. But if I zoom in here for you, you can see that on the thumbnail, Photoshop puts this funny little icon. And I like to think of this as a suitcase. So it's kind of like she is now carrying along the suitcase that is packed with all of her data. And it's going to stay there with her. And it just gives us sort of a way out if we need to make any changes later. So now that she suitcase packed, we can scale her down into the size that might be more along the lines of what we want. So to do that, I'm going to bring up a popular command called free transform. So the keyboard shortcut is Command or Control T for transform. And you can see that that box around thing. And now I can scale her down, make her smaller by just dragging and inwards from the corner. Now I have my preferences set old school style, so I have to hold shift. Otherwise, if I don't hold shift, we could get this, and that is bad. So I have to hold shift, but that is an active. So if you are using the current version of Photoshop, you do not have to hold shift and it will keep it proportional for you. But I guess so once we get this to a size and position that we're happy, maybe that will be good. I don't know yet. Let's find out. But before we do that, we want to make this a smart object as well. So I'm going to come back to the layer panel and I'm going to right click or control click on the layer bar itself, not the thumbnail, but the bar. And then I'll choose convert to smart object. So now we see that our bird layer also gets this little icon. So the birds have also packed their suitcase. Very good, birds. And now we need to address the layer stacking order because we can see that the birds are on top of our umbrella lady, and that is clearly not the way we need it. So all we have to do is take the bird layer and drag it below and drop it. And you can see maybe we like the sky layer just huge like this with these three birds. We'll see. We'll come back to that. I'm going to scale it down for now. And then if we change our minds later, we are in good shape because we have packed that smart object suitcase. So I'll press Command or Control T. And here is a lovely little tip. Sometimes when you've got a huge graphic like this sky image, when you bring up free transform with that Command or Control T, you cannot see the corners on your screen, the corners of the box. And that makes it hard to scale it down. So a quick way to fix that is to press Command or Control 0, and that will actually zoom you out far enough that you can see the corners and you can drag it in. And another little handy tip is I'm going to hold shift, of course, like I said earlier, but another tip, regardless of your preferences, is to press Option or Alt. And then when you scale inward, it's going to go from all four corners at once. So that saves you from having to like bring it in. It kind of has to chew on the image and then it will make the selection. And it's pretty great. I probably use this tool more than most others for making selections. It's very handy. So now that we've got this done, we're going to copy it just like before. Command or Control C. We will pop back over to our image and paste it in. And just like before, we want to pack a suitcase for our clock too. So I'm going to right click or control click and make this a smart object. And while we're here, we should be good Photoshop citizens and we should name our layers probably. So to do that, I'm going to double click on the actual words where we have the default names of layer 1, 2, and 3. So this is the umbrella lady layer. And so we'll call it umbrella lady. And then I can double click here on layer 3 and we'll call it clock, and double click here, layer 2, and this is the sky. I always forget because this is my standard modus operandi now, but the way that I have my thumbnails here is different. It's not the default. So if I bring up panel options for my layer panel, so I went one more time, I went to the little menu right here for the layers panel and click, and then clear towards the bottom, there's something called panel options. And by default, the thumbnail content is set to entire document. And that's great. That shows for each layer thumbnail, it shows the whole document. But a lot of times when I'm working with stuff, I have really tiny things on my layers and it makes it hard to see that way. So for example, if I switch it back to entire document, we'll click OK, and you can see how now it shows the whole thumbnail for the whole document. And the contents of the layer itself are actually quite tiny. So anyway, when you're working with so many small little bits, it can be really handy to have it actually just show you the contents and not necessarily the entire document. So again, that's from the layer panel menu, panel options, and thumbnail contents set to layer bounds. And that can be quite helpful. So just wanted to point that out. Okay, we've got this clock and it's massive. So let's scale it down. We've made it a smart object, so we'll press Command or Control T and Shift Option drag inwards. And then we'll put it up here. And the nice thing is if we want to make it bigger later, we can. To rotate it, I feel like it should be at a bit of an angle. So I'm going to hover my cursor outside this corner point, and then we get that double-edged noodle. And I call it the macaroni noodle. Then we can click and spin ever so gently, just like that. And when we're happy with it, we'll press Return or Enter. And I'm going to grab my Move tool quick and just move it over here a little bit. Now, something I want to point out about this clock is the fact that there are these highlights right here. You see that? And when you're building composites, you really have to pay attention to lighting. And you want to make sure that the lighting on all of the different components of your composite is at least similar enough that it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb, that it's not glaring at you. And this highlight right here is just, I kind of feel like it's borderline glaring at us. So we're going to fix it. And I'm going to show you how we do that. Because we've made this a smart object, we don't fix it here in the image. We actually fix it on like inside the suitcase, right? So we packed all the pixels of the clock in a suitcase. And if we need to open the suitcase, we just double click on the little suitcase. I'm going to do that. And that brings us into the suitcase, which contains the clock. And we are going to fix these little glares with the clone stamp tool. So I'm going to grab that over here on the keyboard, or on the toolbar. The keyboard shortcut is S for stamp. And if you don't know how this tool works, it can, require some practice to get the hang of it. But essentially, it allows us to copy from part of an image and paste to another with a paintbrush. So it's pretty awesome. Right now, I'm just going to work on the same layer because this is really simple fix. But normally you would want to do this on a blank layer. I guess we can do that just to show you. We would normally work on a blank layer, and then up here in the control panel, we need to set the sample to all layers. And that allows us to sample the clock here and paint the solution up here. So how do we sample? We press Alt or Option. I'm holding it down and I get this cursor, and that lets me set a target. So I'm going to click to set a target. So this is the part of the image I'm going to copy. Now when I move my cursor over here and I paint, you can see that it's painting from over here. So again, you just Alt or Option and you click to set what's called a source point, and then you just paint. And you can see that as I'm painting, you can see that there's that little plus that's moving along with me. That's my source point. So as I move my paintbrush, the copy point is also moving. Let's try another technique over here. And when I was initially building this worked like such a dream. And I was like, ooh, I need to show that. And then I tried it again later and it didn't work like such a dream. So we're going to just cross our fingers and gamble here. But it was pretty cool. So I wanted to show you. So instead of painting up here, I'm going to just select the clock layer. And I'm going to make a rough selection with the rectangular marquee tool. And I'm going to lock the transparency of this layer so that we can't paint on anything that is currently empty. So you lock the transparency by clicking right here in the layers panel. And now I'm going to try, again, this is a gamble. It's not going to work probably, or maybe it'll be close. Let's see, it's exciting. So we're going to do a content aware fill right here. So we're going to come up to the edit menu and choose fill. And we're going to tell it content aware. So Photoshop has the ability to just kind of analyze an image and then fix whatever it thinks needs to be fixed. So we're going to try this. It worked pretty well at one point. Let's see. So we'll click OK. Not bad. It got the line correct up here at the top, and then it pasted it down here too. So let's do a little bit of cleanup. So I'm going to deselect the marquee, and let's go back to the clone stamp tool, and we'll just work right on this layer because we're here and I've locked the transparency, which makes it easy to clean up this edge. So I'm going to press Alt or Option over here to click, and I want to follow this line. So you can see that that's why I'm setting my point here, because when I bring my brush over here, I can see a preview of, you see that line? Let's see if I zoom in for you. See this little line right here? I want to line it up with the bottom, and then I know I'm in a good place and I can just drag upwards. Same on this side. I'll just click to select that line. Maybe make my brush a little smaller and line it up here and just paint away. So that, I think, looks much better. So remember that we're not on the clock image. We are in the clock suitcase. How do I know that? Because up here in the file name, it doesn't say clock like the clock does right here. It says layer3.psb, and that is the smart object that we packed in the suitcase. So to get out of here, all we have to do is save it. We don't have to pick a format. We don't have to do anything. I'm just going to press Command or Control S to save it and Command or Control W to close it. And now we see that we've updated the contents of the suitcase, and we can see that that reflection is gone now in our image. So this might be a good point, Kathy, if you have any questions from the people, this might be a good spot.
Sure, we've had a few questions. Anne asked, do you already have an idea what the results should look like before you get started? And how do you come up with these ideas?
That is a very good question. No, I usually have zero idea. So it's always great when Kathy says, "Hey, can you come do a composite for this class?" And so my first step is always massive, just brainstorming and exploring and looking for inspiration. And it is so much trial and error. But it kind of depends. If you're working with stock images, you could, let the stock inspire you. If you are planning to, shoot specifically for a composite that you're going to create, um, then you'd have to have the idea more formulated in your head, because maybe I feel like I should turn on my video while I'm just talking. I don't know if that's a problem, but if you are, shooting images specifically for this concept that you have, then hopefully you really have a good idea of the concept, because when you get into Photoshop and are actually working with it, you may find out that it's quite different than what you planned. Or, I would say you'd have to shoot a lot of different options and shoot things in a variety of different ways to give yourself flexibility, because a lot of times you get into it and then you realize it's not going to work and you end up going in a totally different direction. So bottom line is that it's massive experimentation and planning, I guess, but also just seeing what happens and being open to that. Good question.
Great. There was a really quick question that we have a colleague from Adobe, Meredith, on in the chat with us today. But Meredith answered the question in the chat pod, but I thought maybe you could answer it verbally.
Sure.
Which keystroke did you use when you're zooming out, when you're transforming an object?
That was Command or Control 0. And that will fit the image on your screen. And when your image has an active transformation box around it, it considers that part of the image. So no matter how huge that transform box is, Command or Control 0 will always fit it on your screen. Awesome.
All right. Then there was some discussion about which version of Photoshop you were using and why you chose to fix the clock the way you did instead of using content aware fill. And obviously one of the beauties of Photoshop is that there's no one way to do a lot of things, or multiple ways to do things. But do you want to talk about using content aware fill versus what you did with clone?
Well, I mean, I did do it both ways. So we cloned the first side of the clock, because it's so funny, because when I'm just like working and I'm not on camera with an audience, sometimes I do things one way and then realize later that maybe I should have done it differently. And sometimes it just really doesn't matter. It's like whatever you just grab or reach for first. So we did the left side here with the clone stamp tool. And and then on the right-hand side, I just thought, well, content aware fill is so cool. Let's see how it handles this. And it did a really good job at the first time when I was just like screwing around. And it did a good job here too. Some parts, sometimes whenever you're doing stuff like this, you have to remember that it's not always a one tool, one click job. I mean, Photoshop's come so far that a shocking amount of things can sometimes be one click and you're done. But oftentimes, a much more realistic expectation is that you combine different tools in different ways to get you that much closer. So I think it's always good to have a few tricks up your sleeve, because depending on the image and the situation, you may realize that one way works really great in one image and not so great in another. Okay.
Yeah, and we have another question. Fred kind of commented and asked, he says, sometimes composites look like a composite, but your woman with an umbrella looks like she was a single shot.
Oh, with the background?
Why does that happen? And do you try to fix it, or do you leave it as it is?
Um, I think it's, I think the important thing is being aware of your lighting and camera angles. You know, this would look super weird if she had been photographed from a high angle or a low angle. So all of the things in this scene are shot from pretty front, straight on, eye level kind of look. Everything's just flat. And you know, that's you have to look for that stuff. So you may have an idea for a really great concept, a really great composite, and maybe you think I'm gonna use stock for this, but maybe you have a hard time finding stock, you know, like of a clock that's the exact angle that you need. And so in some cases, you may have to go out and shoot something yourself. But those are all things, camera angle, lighting, um, those are all things that need to work together to make an image believable.
Great, thank you. One last question, and then we've got about 25 minutes left for you to keep going. Barbara pointed out to people that when you get out of a suitcase, you need to hit Control S and then also Control W to close that back up. Is that
Yes,
right?
that's exactly correct. So you save it and then you close it. So Command or Control S to save it and Command or Control W to close it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Why don't you keep going?
All right, good question. So this clock, I liked the idea of like time flying. So that's so literal. I suppose it's just silly at that point, but I wanted to put some wings here behind this clock. So here is this bird image that is also on a very simple background, but this branch that's down here kind of complicates things a little bit. So, but really it's, we don't need this part. We don't need the tail or his feet or her feet, I should say. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take the rectangular marquee selection tool and I'm going to click and drag to just draw a box around um, the wings, basically, leaving a little bit of breathing room. And then I'm going to grab my magic wand tool that again makes selections based on color similarity. And I'm going to make sure that up here in the control panel that I've got the minus option turned on. So I'm going to bring my cursor into this area and I'm going to click to minus the sky from the selection. And that leaves us with a really great selection of the wings. So we'll copy that, come back over here, paste it in, make it a smart object, scale it down. Here's that keyboard shortcut again, Command or Control 0 to zoom out and drag this inwards. We'll zoom back in so we can see what we're doing. And again, I'm going to rotate it to match the similar rotation of the clock. So if I hover outside of the transform box, I get that double-headed curved arrow and I can click and spin it. And maybe I want it to be not huge, just you can decide how big you want your clock wings to be. That looks good to me, so I'll commit that. And then, of course, let's rename this because we're good little Photoshop people. So that's just a double click to rename the layer. And then I'm going to drag it in the layers panel below the clock layer so that it is behind. Now I feel like I need to move the clock a little bit. And I'm going to rotate the clock the other way just a little to, I feel like it doesn't match. So I press Command or Control T again, and then I can hover out here and rotate it. If I want to move them both, like I'm not really loving that it's on top of this bird, I'm going to click the clock and then Command or Control click on the wings layer. And then with the move tool, I can move them both. So I feel like that looks better. That's looking good. So now we just need this hat. Because of course this image is all, I don't know, I really liked that it's like she's black and white, obviously, but this is in color and the sky is in color, but they're very grayscale, even though they're technically in color, and I just liked it. And it looks so like steampunky to me. So this is a steampunk-esque hat, and we are going to select it using yet another tool, which is part of the Magic Wand family here, the W family. This one is the object selection tool. So this one sort of combines like the rectangular marquee tool with the select subject button right here. So if I hit just select subject by itself, it's probably going to get a little bit tangled up with all of this, because how would it know how would it know that I only want the hat? But this could very much also be part of the quote subject. And so I feel like that's just asking Photoshop a little too much. So I want to help direct it by defining the area to select within. So I'm just dragging a little rectangle around the hat. And then when I let go, it's basically going to apply the select subject button. And you can see it did a pretty decent job. Obviously, this inside is complicated. We could probably leave this like it is because her head is going to be here, but I do kind of want to add this area just I'm not sure where we'll put her head. So I'm going to go back to that quick selection tool, and it's in add mode. I'm making the brush bigger with the right bracket key. And then remember that it's kind of like a Magic Wand paintbrush, so I can just kind of paint around in here to just, this is all going to get out anyway, but I can paint around to just clean that out. And maybe if I don't want this, which again is going to be masked anyway, but if I wanted to take this out, I can hold down Alt or Option and just paint across it. Okay, so this is looking good. Same thing, copy it and paste it, pack that suitcase, and we will label it hat. And let's drag it on top of her. And then we need to scale it down. Command or Control T, zoom out. And I'm going to hold Option or Alt again to scale it from all sides at once. And then see how it fits. Try it on. Zoom in so we can see. And here's a little tip too. I'm not done with this. Did I squish it? It looks a little squished. Nope. Okay. I'm going to conform that for now, but I would like to see her underneath this hat. So I'm going to temporarily drop the opacity of this hat layer down and like to 50% or so. So I'm in the layers panel. I've got it selected. I'll drag the opacity slider down a little bit. And now I can see like how it fits on her head a little bit better, because I can see her head underneath, and I can see like, okay, that might be a good fit. Of course, we have to get rid of this inside. We have several problems happening. This is the last piece of this image. But we have several problems. We have obviously this part. We need to make it look like her head is in the hat. We also have this glow happening, which is kind of weird. Maybe we like it. Maybe it's part of the surrealism, but kind of looks like like there's a light source there that we're not seeing, which is kind of weird. And also we just have some major color bleeding, color spill here on the side of the hat. And maybe we like it, but maybe we don't. We can see here too on the goggles, there's some major blue color spill. So we could leave it or we could do something about it. So I'm going to show you how I would do something about it. First thing is we need to get rid of this. So we're going to mask this out. So masking is an amazing technique that allows us to basically hide stuff. It's almost like erasing, but flexible. So to add a mask to this hat, I'm going to make sure the hat layer is selected, and down at the bottom of the layers panel, I'm going to click that little rectangle with the circle inside. That'll add a mask. And the way that masks work is you paint on them with black or with white. or shades in between. But here we see this little white thumbnail. So the mask right now is blank. And I'm going to just go grab my paintbrush. So I'll press B for my paintbrush tool. And I'm going to press X so that I've got black on top here, because I had white active, and X lets me flip-flop these colors, the foreground and background. So I want black on top. And now, instead of trying to like paint on this little mask thumbnail right here, what we do is we actually just paint right on the image. And you can see that as I do this, I probably should change my brush a little bit, make it smaller, but yeah. As I do that, it is hiding the hat and it's revealing the rest of the image. So if I go too far, like, whoops, I painted farther than I meant to, all I have to do to fix it is press X so that now I'm painting with white. And I'll make my brush a little smaller because I think that was out of control. And then we'll just paint away this hat. And here we can also paint away, we'll have to move this, but I'm going to paint away the glow from the inside. There's a lot of ways to fix it, and we can go over some of those. But right now, in the interest of time, I'm just going to paint those away. And then let's grab the move tool and see if we reposition this on her head, maybe here. And then if I need to restore this, I'll paint with white again to bring some of that back. And we'll fix this color in a moment. So does that make sense? If we look at just the hat without the mask, I can shift click on the mask and we see there is the whole hat layer and there's the part we masked. And if I want to show you just the mask itself, if I Alt Option click, you can see here that all it is black paint on a white background. So if you think of the black like blocking the layer, that's exactly what's happening. Everywhere that we painted black is blocking the hat from showing up. Okay, so I think this looks decent, but this whole color bleed situation is painful. So what we're going to do is add a new blank layer, and I'm going to get my paintbrush, and I'm going to make the edge of my brush harder. So if I click this little arrow here, you can see that there's a slider for hardness and for size, but you can also do this with your keyboard. So the right and left bracket keys change the size of your brush, and shift left right bracket keys change the hardness. So I'm going to harden this up a little bit, and I'm going to press I for the eyedropper tool, and I'm going to sample part of this hat. So like this color right here, I'm just going to click to sample it and press B to get my brush back. And then I'm going to clip this layer. So watch this. So let's paint, like I'm just scribbling out here, right? Look at this. That's a mess. But what I want to do is I want this paint to only stick to the hat. So in the layers panel, I'm going to hold down Alt or Option. And look, when I do that, you see how my cursor changes to this funny little thing? That tells me that if I click right here, this layer will get clipped to this one. So I'm going to hold down that Alt or Option and then click. Ta-da! And now we see that that messy paint layer only appears on the hat. So if I undo it by repeating the same process, holding Alt or Option, you can see there's the whole mess of paint, and here it is only sticking to the hat. Now this still looks silly, doesn't it? Because we are not seeing any of the texture and lighting values underneath. So we're going to change this from normal blend mode to color. And now it is just like we were coloring in a coloring book where it automatically keeps you inside the lines. So I'm just going to go around, and here's where we can fix some of this. It's also like orange down here. It's very cool, but not what we want for this scene. So I am just painting basically over everything that I want to be blue on this hat. So this addresses a lot of the lighting issues. Oh, we'll fix this in a minute. This will address a lot of those lighting issues. And it's really quite handy. We're going to do something similar here with the goggles. And I thought maybe we could sample the color from this clock, like this orange color. We'll see how that looks. So I've got my paintbrush. I've got orange now. I'm on the same layer. And now I'm just going to paint. I like that. I'm just going to paint away this blue. I had my tablet here ready to go. So I'm doing this all on my mouse trackpad, which I like doing because I like proving that you don't have to have a tablet. That said, tablets are great. And I don't know why somehow when we kicked over to one of the software we're using for the webinar, it like disabled my tablet. That's kind of funny. So I am doing this on the good old trackpad. All right. And we can decide this buckle, maybe I'm going to kind of paint that. I'm going to paint that too. We could leave that, we could make that like black and white, but I'm going to paint it too. And there you have it. That is it in a nutshell. So what questions do we have? We've got some time, 10 minutes.
Yeah, we've had a great audience. In fact, people are jumping in to answer questions and help people out and stuff while we're going, which is super fun. You guys have been a great group today. A question was asked on how you get the transparent background of the clock. So you may want to show how you layered the clock and made it transparent.
Right. So we selected the clock from this image here. So it's still active. You can see the marching ants. So we used the good old select subject button here, and that selected the clock. And then when we copied and pasted it in, we just brought the clock without the background. And just like all these other objects, we made it a smart object. So then when we went into clean up that reflection, we did that not by returning to this image here. This image is basically dead to us now. We've taken what we wanted from it, and now we just ignore it. We're done with this image. So instead of returning here to fix the reflections, we instead work on the suitcase for this clock. So we do that by double clicking on the clock layer in the layers panel, and that opens up this temporary file. And you'll notice it's called layer3.psb because when we created this smart object, the clock layer was called layer 3. So this is basically, we've kind of like left Photoshop land, sort of, in terms of our images over here as a totally different file. And we have now taken a little sidecar into the suitcase. And any changes that we make here will be reflected in our document here after we save and close this file. So for example, if let's just merge this for simplicity's sake, and let's say that I add a gradient overlay to this, like this. We'll change the blend mode to that, and we'll click OK. So let's say that now we're going to have our clock be like this. So we've made this change. We don't see it here yet. Nothing's here yet. But when I go back to this clock, the suitcase, and I hit Command or Control S to save it and Command or Control W to close it, now we're back in our image and we can see that it's updated. So it's kind of like we're pulling the clock aside and we're working on it sort of behind the scenes, working on that suitcase, and then it comes back out on stage over here and it's looking however we wanted it to look. So if I want to change that, I can double click again and I can hide this effect, save it, close it. Now it's back. Hopefully that
Great,
answers.
thank you. Laura commented that she finally understands what masking does, so thank you for
Yay.
that.
Excellent. That is a massive, that's a massive thing. You have a whole new world open to you now.
Whole new world. And she also asked, how do you get rid of the hair that looks like it's growing out of the hat? And I know hair with selections and everything is
Oh yeah.
super
That's
tricky, but we have some Photoshop
well,
magic that can help with that.
let's here's the thing. So we kind of still have two problems. We have the still a light source. I didn't mask enough of the hat to get rid of this over here. So that's one problem. And then we do have hair that's like blowing out of this part. So in like a perfect world, this hair would be coming, like if this wasn't a composite, I would expect that this hair would be blowing from here, like in front of the hat and over here. So we could try and select the hair and like bring it to the front, but it's easier to just manufacture things sometimes. It really depends, like how nitpicky you have to be about every pixel in this composite depends on how it's planning to be used. I mean, if it's just going to be like a low res, you know, social media post or something, maybe you don't have to be so careful. But if you were going to print this, you know, at high resolution at a large size, then you'd want to spend more time on it. So let's talk about how we can deal with this situation. Um, I'm going to create a new layer, and we're going to use the clone stamp again. But this time, instead of normal mode, we are going to choose darker color. And now we're gonna cross our fingers that I set this up right. Now I'm gonna borrow, remember we're cloning, borrow from this part of the hat, and I'm going to paint it over here. But I'm not painting so much like the color or texture or anything. I'm basically painting the darkness. So basically what we wanna do here is just darken this. I don't need to cover anything or hide anything. I just wanna darken it. So I'm going to click over here in a darker area of the hat. I'm holding Alt or Option to click and set my source point. And now as I come over here and paint, you can see the tail dragging along, and it is, I need to set it a little higher, I think. It is, oops, and this piece was in the wrong place. It's painting any part of this that is lighter than what the source material is going to be darkened. That's what is happening. So will this be a perfect fix? Maybe not, but it does help. You can see here, we're darkening this up. It does help get rid of the glow that is like coming from inside her hat. And this is so hard on my trackpad. Another option, of course, would be that we could try and mask this out, but we might run into some other problems, like now we're seeing her hair back there. So maybe we end up scaling the hat down a little bit to kind of address all of that. It is definitely a bit of a dance, a little bit here and, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. For the hair here, I would make a new layer, grab that same clone brush, but this time put it, well, still maybe in darker mode. Let's see how that's gonna look. And then I'm just gonna click in her hair over here, and I'm gonna make my brush very tiny, and I'm just gonna paint, again, with the trackpad, it might be uh, more realistic or easy to get what you're looking for, but just basically putting some hair here. And I think there's a number of brushes that might be especially helpful for this. But I'm just using a nothing special round brush. to kind of paint this in and sort of create some wispy flyaway hairs here, like you might expect. And you would be surprised how actually forgiving and easy hair is to do this kind of stuff. Like, it's surprisingly forgiving.
That's awesome. You showed us several different ways to solve a problem. Like I said, there's never only one way to do something in Photoshop.
Exactly.
You're kind
That's
of
why it's
limited
so
by
great.
only your creativity. We've got a few more questions and we're right at time. Karen asked, when do you feather selections?
Oh, that's a great question. Feathering just basically softens the edge of something. So it really depends what you're selecting or what your goal is. If I make a like this and I just fill it with no feather, it's a hard edge. But if we feather it by coming up to the select menu and we choose modify feather, then you have to guess a value. So I'm going to guess like 100 pixels. You can see that it rounded the edges. Literally, it turned a square closer to a circle. And now if I fill it, it's fuzzy. So that's what feathering does. It takes a selection and it basically feathers or softens the edge. So anytime you're trying that effect, that's a great way to get there.
Great. And Barbara said that clipping is
Mhm.
confusing. Do you have a quick tip to
Yes. So
master clipping?
master clipping. Here's what this layer looks like unclipped. You can see that I've painted in the lines. And when we clip it, we are just telling Photoshop that this messy paint should only show up on the hat layer or whatever layer is underneath. When you clip things, you have to have one layer clipped directly to the layer below. So one of the ways that I like to explain this is if you think back to like preschool artwork where you would scribble a bunch of like pour a bunch of glue on a plate and then dump glitter on top. And then when everything dried, you could shake the plate off and the glitter would only stick to the glue. That's what this is. So this becomes the glitter layer and this hat layer becomes the glue. And when I clip it together, all of this extra glitter that isn't overlapping the glue, there's no hat here, that all goes away. And we're just left with the glitter that is on top of the glue. So if I move the glue, if I select this glue layer and I move it around, if I move it out of the paint layer, you can see that we've lost all of it. So now if we unclick them, the paint is here. So now I've separated them. But because they are lined up here, the glitter is on top of the glue. When we shake the plate, so to speak, the erroneous glitter disappears. I hope that helps. Every time I do it, I think of like preschool, kindergarten art projects, and it seems to help.
That was wonderful. Gosh, we have just a few more questions. We're going to run a little late, guys. Sorry about that, but I want to make sure that we get all the questions answered. Derek asked, after you select with the brush selection and you get the moving outline, I think marching ants, how do you copy and paste it, i.e. to get it as a new layer?
So anytime that you have a selection in Photoshop, when you we copied, for example, these wings over here, when we come to another document and we paste, it automatically becomes a new layer. So Photoshop knows that layers are where it's at, and it does everything it can to keep different bits in different layers. So that happens automatically.
So Photoshop takes care of it for us because it somehow knows what we want it to do. I like that.
Yes, it's so clever.
Lori asked, when you colored the hat and glasses, why didn't the blue spill into the glasses or the orange onto the blue hat?
Great question, because I painted the orange on top. I would, because we don't have here, we'll turn on. I don't know if you guys see when I turn my camera back on. Can you see me? I don't know. Um, I just very carefully painted the orange on top of the glasses, and I painted the blue on top of the hat. So if I had made a mistake, oh, brush, then, if I had picked up the blue and painted it on the glasses would be blue. So I painted this in the same way you paint or color a coloring sheet. Um, the only helpful thing is that if we paint outside over here, remember that the hat is the glue, so we won't see anything that we paint over here. But the minute that I drag my paintbrush onto the hat layer, now we can see it. So it's just a matter of painting orange on the things you want to be orange and blue on the things you want to be blue.
All righty, thank you for that. Phyllis asked if you were inspired by Marguerite for this composite.
Oh, I can't say that I was, but you never know. Subconsciously, it could be. That's fun.
Sandra asked what bar you hit to convert the birds.
Convert the birds. I'm not sure what that means.
I'm not sure either, Sandra, if you want to maybe clarify in the chat pod real quick. While we're doing that, Lou asked, when you were painting the mask, did you keep the brush opacity at 100% to keep things simple?
I did. Yes, that's a good question. You can paint on the mask black and white, and you can adjust your brush opacity up here in the control panel. You can also paint with shades of gray, which would have the same effect as adjusting the brush opacity. And that would just allow a smoother transition. But here, I didn't need a partially opaque mask. I just wanted it gone. So I just did it at 100%.
All right, we haven't heard back from Sandra on exactly what she went by converting the birds. All right, so I think we'll skip that one, and we'll end with, there were some other positive comments throughout the chat pod, but Daphne said, thanks, Kara. I always learn something new from your videos. And I would have to agree that this was an extremely educational session that we had. I think we all picked up some tidbits. Great composite. Thank you for spending an hour with the Photo Plus Plus audience. And thank you to the Photo Plus Plus audience today. Really appreciate y'all being with us.
Yay, well, it's always my pleasure. This is a royal treat. So thank you for having me.
Yeah.